Oh boy. Now that would have surely been the end of our heroes. There were just too many of those wolfmen to take on. No shame in living to fight another day. Bembul ran like he never ran before, and Urist entered himself into a martial trance, dodging trees and finding a clear path out of there. Yeah, that was a close one. The boys took it slow, wandering a bit through the hermetic hills, and pretty soon found themselves tired and hungry at the end of the day. They were still a little shook up and didn't feel too great about sleeping out in the open. Thinking about their elf friends, they made it up this tree to camp for the night. With the sun just peeking up behind the hills, Urist and Bembul awoke surprisingly well rested. That said, they were ready to get out of this tree and get back on the road. Now, no sooner had they removed themselves from the tree that they caught sight of this here pack of giant dingoes. Now, whether they were sleeping or just not paying attention, they somehow did not seem to notice a horse and a dwarf clambering out of the tree right beside them. Our boys just decided to creep off into the dawn, thoroughly resolved to get out of here post-haste. Having had quite enough of the local wildlife, Urist and Bembul kept on heading west. It was time to start crossing the mountains, reach their goal on the other side. Come on, Bembul. Let's ride. Hey now, would you look at that? A cave. You don't just walk past a cave and not go into the depths of it, now do you? Let's check it out. Besides, who wants to sit out in the rain? Wolfmen and giant dingoes we can handle, but this is untenable. Now, after a period of some confusion and poking around, they did in fact find the entrance to that cave. Down into the cave they went. Having descended quite far into the cave, our boys came upon this gremlin. They were a little spooked at first, but this gremlin turned out to be a friendly fellow. They had a brief conversation and even sang a little song together before saying their goodbyes. Now, this fella here came on pretty hostile right out the gates. I'm not sure what we did to upset him, but he refused an offer for a cease to hostilities. Now, them's fighting words. Now, that flying copper bolt struck the gremlin in the left lower arm, tearing the muscle, opening an artery, and severing a sensory nerve. Bembul then came up from behind, kicked him in the neck. That neck is now a lump of gore. A second artery was opened at that time as well. Gremlin tried to yield, Urist was all for it, but Bembul just kicked him again in the left foot. That left foot exploded in the gore, a third artery was opened, and the ankle was as well split into gore. Bembul then just continues to kick this poor gremlin. He kicks him in the left upper leg, smashing that leg into the body, an unrecognizable mass at this time. Fourth artery opened up, but who's counting there? The force pulled the hip, the bone is bruised, and just bit him in the other foot, and that came sailing off in an arc. And then Bembul kicked him in the mouth, and that mouth was also exploded into gore. At this time, fortunately, the gremlin bled to death. Bembul might have gotten a little out of hand there, not going to lie. We could have ended that a little bit earlier, but you know, when Urist and Bembul Advise you to cease hostilities. You might consider ceasing hostilities. Moving on. Well, they thought this cave was going to have to come to something eventually. Lo and behold, they found themselves an expansive cavern. It was time to explore. Now, it seemed like the only path down was to wind their way around these mushroom trees. Couldn't really find a path down to the cavern floor. In fact, Urist had to leave poor Bembul sitting up here on the mushroom and just climb down himself, sort of clamber down the stalk. And now somehow Bembul managed to get down there too, and so they decided to take a ride around this cavern. Now, aside from some lovely cave wheat growing down here and some plump helmets, there really didn't seem to be too much going on. Now, this was a little bit of a disappointment after roughly 2 hours of descending into a cave, but you know, you can't win them all, and it was starting to feel like they might never find the path back up this obscure-looking wall to the mushroom trees above back into the cave proper, so they decided that they really ought to just leave this scene behind and maybe get on out of this cave, go see the daylight again. Yep, the boys were eager to get back on the road, and it was time to start heading again towards the west. The next day, they knew they were going to begin their climb through the mountains, so they camped that night by the very first slope of the Great Western Mountain Range. On the other side, they hoped to find some friendly dwarves in the towns there. At dawn, they would begin the climb. Through the cold and the snow, Urist and Bembul rode, dodging all manner of yaks and large birds as they went. It became something of a meditation, watching the sun arc across the sky, thinking about nothing but getting to the other side of these hills. There's nothing to do but keep on walking, one foot in front of the other. And as the sun got low in the west, Urist and Bembul found themselves sitting on the highest peak for miles around. It was a very, very long mountain range, and we had only just begun. It began to snow something fierce right around the Horn of Tenderness. Well, we kept on trudging through. Came around a bend and ran into something a little unexpected. We had a group of owl men here. Well, Urist, not wanting to be impolite, spoke up and exchanged a few pleasantries. And then one of those owl men, just out of nowhere, started scrambling about being in the midst of a conflict. It didn't make much sense to Urist, but things took a dark turn when the owl man began to violently attack Bembul. Now, of course, we couldn't be having that, so Bembul got the first shot in and kicked him in the left upper arm, bruising the muscle. Urist, having nothing else at hand, smacked him with the pecan wood Ozresh, managing to bruise a foot. Well, then he let that copper bolt fly, hit him right in the left wing. Well, it seemed only fitting that Bembul got the final shot in, kicking him right in the head, collapsing it into a lump of gore. I must say that Urist was quite upset over Bembul being so mistreated. That may help to explain his extraction of several owlman bones, perhaps in an effort to carve a figurine monument to the occasion. Well, by the time he got through all that, he just thought to himself, well, I suppose I'll just toss this skull in my sheep wool bag. Might find a good use for it later. He hoped this wasn't an irreversible turn towards a darker version of himself, but he didn't pay that too much mind. He just kept right on walking. He was halfway across the mountains by now and eager for a place to rest his feet a while. He'd spied this cluster of towns to the south from the mountaintop. It seemed like a worthy detour. Perhaps they could pass on a little knowledge of the surrounding area. So Urist and Bembul turned toward the south and rode down into the town of Scaly Granite. As far as taverns go, this one was pretty bare bones, but you know what? It was one of the most beautiful sights Urist ever did behold. For the first time in weeks, he had himself a wide variety of alcohol to drink. Out of a silver goblet, no less. And he thoroughly enjoyed the friendly conversation. Well, they even had a stored instrument or two. But one chance encounter would change Urist's trajectory in an instant. He couldn't help but overhear a sad voice say, "I am separated from these lost swallow slipped. I cannot give in to sadness." Urist asked him how he was, and what he heard, well, it broke his heart. "Several years ago, my niece Isla Swallow Slipped was kidnapped from Gorge Creature by Nako Spidery Souled." And he proceeded to tell him that Nako was last known to reside in the dark goblin fortress of Danced Hells. Just thinking about that girl locked up with those goblins reminded him of all the evil he'd seen back in Craftseed. Something told Urist that if he could help this family, it might make up for some of that devastating loss. And so, feeling somewhat disembodied, he'd heard himself asking for directions. "Can you tell me the way to Danced Hells?" "Danced Hells is far to the north. There's a tavern there, named the Cinnamon of Cruelties."
He never misses when his crossbow he doth fire. He traverses all terrain, questing through the muck and mire, recovering lost treasure as he slays occasional beast. Then he'll join you in the tavern for a dwarven ale and feast. He'll join you for a dwarven ale and feast. Join you for a dwarven ale and feast. He'll ask you for directions anywhere he wants to go. Then he'll spread another rumor of somebody's tale of woe. He'll brag about past violent acts and all the things he'll do. Then compose himself a poem and recite it now for you. Composing and performing now for you. He's starting a performance now for you.